So throughout every single season of Overwatch competitive, it seems like there's always one really good tank, one okay tank, and the rest of them are just kind of let out to dry. I mean, I guess you can pick them up if you want to, but why not play the other ones? And right now it seems like we're kind of going into a situation where that might not even really be the case. Now, of course, you will always need a tank on your team, or two tanks. That's just kind of how the game's been going on for a while now. But right now, a lot of the tanks are being hit, and a lot of tank counters are kind of coming back into the meta, and I think for a lot of tank mains, it's going to be kind of hard to continue playing this role. Now, I will still say, I personally love playing tank, and I really do think that tank is one of the most rewarding classes in the game, and I would not say at all to stop playing tank. I'm just kind of warning you guys that it might become a little hard for at least the next few weeks. Now, the first thing to cover right here is that, of course, Diva was nerfed, and I think most of us can agree, yeah, Diva did deserve a nerf. I mean, when you compare Diva to all the other tanks, she had more mobility, more damage, a lot of damage mitigation, a pop-off ult. She just really had kind of everything, and now with her damage nerf, I think she's more in line with a lot of the other tanks. Which I think on paper is a really good thing because, yeah, you do want so that you can switch between the tanks. That's a really good thing, obviously. But by nerfing Diva and not really buffing up any of the other tanks, it just kind of creates a situation where there's just one less good tank, and now you kind of have Orisa, and you kind of have Diva, she's still pretty good, and you kind of have Roadhog, and on a few maps I guess you could argue to maybe pick Reinhardt, but still, yeah, that's kind of difficult. I feel like right now a lot of the tanks just kind of have a problem and have had a problem for a while, and instead of kind of buffing them up or changing up their kits or anything to actually fit more into the game and to kind of play more against, I guess, the super fast-paced way the game's been playing, they're just kind of getting hurt more and more. Now, the number one thing I want to talk about right now about how they're kind of getting hurt is, first off, of course, dive meta and how fast it is. For a lot of the tanks, unless you are Winston and Diva, I mean, there's just not that much you can do against that. Especially if you're playing, for example, against a triple DPS and they have Winston in competitive. If they're playing that well and if their DPS are extremely skilled, I mean, as a tank player like Reinhardt or Orisa, or even Roadhog, you can sometimes pull off some nice kills, you can sometimes space them out a little bit, but oftentimes you won't really get enough backup to stay alive for long enough to do that, and they can kind of just dive straight past you. And with the mobility heroes never really getting nerfed, that really creates a problem for a lot of the people that are more anchor tanks, more main tanks. I guess another problem I should say right here is that there are a few other characters that did just barely get buffs, mainly Reaper and Mei, and both of these characters are very good against tanks. Now, of course, they're decent against DPS and decent against supports, and now they're a little bit better against those, but I think especially against tanks, that's probably the people they can kill the best or crowd control the best. With Mei, you can catch out tanks a lot of the time because tanks have to be pushed a lot further up. Maybe they go a little bit past the choke point for 1 second, Mei plops it down, kills the tank, rip them. As well, of course, being able to freeze the tanks can be kind of nice because it's kind of hard to miss that and most tanks don't have way too much mobility. As far as Reaper goes, he's kind of in a similar boat as far as beating tanks. He just does so much damage against them. And really, now with Reaper getting a buff, which allows him to, A, deal even more damage while safely reloading, and also be able to, I guess, just run straight past the tanks and kill some of the backline, maybe, if he wants to try to do that, or really just being there more and being picked more and being played against tanks more. It's going to be kind of hard as a tank player to figure out exactly what to do against Reaper. Now, Reaper's never been the absolute best character in the game against tanks, but he has been a good soft counter to them, and let's say your team, again, isn't healing you up or isn't supplying you peel, Reaper can sometimes just walk straight up and blast through your front line as a tank main, and with both those characters getting buffs, I think it's going to make the life of a tank main a little bit even harder. Now, another person I should talk about right here, which I guess is kind of good for tank mains and kind of bad, is Brigitta. She's coming out, you know, in like 20 days or something. But I think the problem is that she's only really good with Reinhardt. And I guess you can argue that she's pretty good with some of the other tanks. But in most of the cases, I'm going to say she works well with Reinhardt. She can go in with her, Death Ball, do all that. And some of the other tanks, I guess, can kind of benefit somewhat. But I think problem about this is that she's also very good against a lot of the tanks, and actually kind of a hard counter against some of the tanks. Against people like Roadhog, you can actually kind of stop his ability to get picks by booping him out of the way before he gets a kill after his hook, which is kind of nice. Against Rissa, I mean, because it's not too good or too bad against her, so not too bad right there. Against Winston, you can boop him away. Against Diva, you can stop her engage before she can get a kill with her new worst burst. So I think that also being added, I guess, could somewhat help tanks, but I think in general it is going to make them even harder to play in a lot of cases, and might kind of screw them over even more a bit in competitive solo queue. Now back to Diva right here. I want to mention the fact that Diva being nerfed, again, will open up the slots for what tanks you want to play, as long as it doesn't just become a triple DPS meta, which might happen, but I don't think it will. But it will open up the slots a little bit more. But I think it'll also hurt a lot of the tanks in general, because Diva allowed for, first, Winston to dive really well, and she still can, but not quite as much. As well, she allowed for Reinhardt's shield to last quite a bit longer. And yes, you still can do that, but I think she won't be able to counter-engage quite as well. And back to the Diva nerfs, they aren't the worst thing in the world. They aren't going to make her completely useless. I think she's still going to be a very good character, but just when you compare her to a lot of the other, I guess, best characters, she might drop down quite a bit, and she really does enable a lot of the other tanks, kind of like Zarya, so it might be kind of hard for yourself in that situation. Speaking of Zarya, I think she's a tank that could really use something against the meta that we're going against right now, and that we've really just been going against forever. Ever since Season 3, Zarya hasn't been able to do way too much. She's been able to get damage out if you're really good at her, and get some nice ults, and that's kind of it. And I think she could either use, again, more charge per second, a better way to deal with flankers, or just so that her beam does more damage to flankers, or something. Really just something else for her. I think that could be kind of nice, but I don't know. I guess we won't see that. But I think that is another tank that has really been getting screwed for quite a while. And these nerfs are just going to make it even harder on her, because the other tanks are going to be a bit worse. It's going to make her have a harder time, and all of that. At least that's what I'm kind of expecting for it to kind of go along. Now, a thing I'm going to switch to right here is the fact that the meta is really fast-paced right now, and has a huge amount of high mobility DPS. And I think a problem for a lot of people, especially with someone playing tank, is that you just can't do much against these characters. What you can mainly do with dive comp is dive on the enemy backline and hope that you can get more kills than the enemies are getting on your own backline, and that can work. Or as well, you can play a shield tank that you hope that your supports are right next to you. You hope that you can somehow block the instant one-shot, one-clip from Tracer, or the kills from Genji, or the fist from Doomfist, and those are kind of the two options. But right now, with it being so fast-paced, it's kind of hard for a lot of the tanks to do much against it, and they kind of just have to wait until the enemy team engages, goes for all their damage, hope that not too many people die, and then they play from there. I don't know what the Overwatch team can really do too much about this. I guess they could kind of look at the past, and I guess like season 1 to 5, or maybe even 6, where there wasn't as much as that, as much dive. And maybe what they could do is slightly nerf some of the dive characters. I know some people really do like watching dive, but as far as tanks, it is kind of hard, because a lot of them become just kind of useless in that situation. Now, I think one problem is that a lot of the DPS just simply aren't going to be nerfed. I mean, if you look at Tracer, she's never been nerfed. And if you look at her at every single rank, she's like in the top 5 best characters. Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious that that's pretty good. She's great against tanks, great against everything. And I don't know, as far as it goes right now, I guess tanks just are having a lot of trouble against just fast comps. And especially for someone that doesn't want to play dive comp yourself, it can be kind of hard to really do much in games. A lot of times you're just kind of waiting there and hoping that something will eventually happen that you can kind of interact with in the game. And as far as right there, I should also mention that it's kind of easy to ignore choke points right now. There's quite a few characters that can just run straight past them, and depending on the map, it can be especially hard for someone like Reinhardt to do that much, because I mean, if the map's really far open, he's just he can't do much. His shield will just be ran right past, ran right around, and that is kind of hard. And I think especially with main tank players, they are kind of getting screwed as far as the meta is evolving over and over and over again. Now, of course, there was spam comp where it was a little bit different, but as far as where it is right now, yeah, it is getting pretty hard for them, especially since we kind of realized that, yeah, quad tank is not doing the best. I mean, sometimes it can do okay, but not usually. But anyways, those are just kind of my own feelings about playing tanks right now. I know this is probably blown out of the water. I know most tanks are still pretty good, but I feel like right now it's kind of not the funnest time to play this role. And even though they might still be necessary, they might still be playable, you still might I have to go for them. I feel like, just at least for me, it's not the funnest meta at all to play a lot of the tanks, and I think that can kind of discourage people from playing them. I know there's a lot of tank mains kind of switching off of it for this meta because it feels like they can't do way too much, and I hope that that kind of changes because we really need to keep our tank mains because they are somewhat few and far between. But anyways, with all that all said, guys, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like or tell me down below what you think about this topic. Do you think tank mains are kind of getting screwed, or do you think they're still doing pretty well? I'd really like to know you guys' opinions. With that all said, though, guys, thank you all for watching and have a wonderful day.